Okay.
All right, there was a huge front yard that went down here. And then there was a driveway that came up to the side. And over here on this side of the driveway was the mailbox. And down here were all these gorgeous, tall, old maple trees. And right over in here was a magnolia tree. And by the magnolia tree, at one time, there was a buried glass top greenhouse. Now, this is the big house. And it had gravel paths all the way around the house. And then this is the porch that went across the front, down the side, curved, went in, and went back to this part of the house. And then there was a back porch, and then this little area over here was a west porch. This is not even close to scale.
It's okay.
This little room back here was the washroom, bathroom. This was the kitchen, and here was what was originally a dining room, and over here was a utility room, which Mrs. Burgess commandeered for a bedroom. There was a stairway that went up to an attic that had no windows that you could see except from the back of the house, and then there was a little bedroom here that had a door that went out on the west porch. This was the living room. There was a door out here, and a door out here, and then all along here were windows, and then there was a door, and it went on to the porch. And then there was a window here and another window over here, and this long room that was here had windows, and a door onto the porch, and Mom and Dad's room. So there were 3 doors and a window onto this little porch. And then here was the entryway, and it had a big wide door with side lights, and you went up this gorgeous staircase, and you went up 5 steps, and there was a landing, and then you turned, and you went up 3 more steps, and there was a landing, and then you turned, and you went up 5 more steps, and here was a beautiful balcony hall that was as big as most rooms. We counted as a room. It was 11 by 12, which I've got rooms in this house not that large. That was where I was allowed to keep my toys and my playthings in the summertime. And over here was the nicest bedroom in the house, which rarely got used. It actually had a closet. And in that closet were stored my grandfather, Roscoe Conklin Linderman's antique cameras. My brother, unfortunately, sold those to an antique dealer. Anyway, you went out the back, and then here was a big backyard, and we used to have clotheslines all across this. Over here was the gate that went into what Mama called the kitchen garden. And then over beside that was the outhouse. And then as you went out here, at the side there was a coal shed. And I'm sure my children remember the coal shed. And that was where we stored literally coal and brought it in to feed when we had warm running stoves. Here was the driveway that led back to the 3-car garage. And that originally had doors, and Dad decided they were terribly in his way, so he took all the doors off, used them to build something. By the 3-car garage, but in front of it was a big office building. He called it an office. It had a chimney and a place for a stove. It had a front door with steps that led into it, and it had windows on either side. And at one point we had a hired man whose name was Fox, and I don't remember his first name, who lived in that for 2 or 3 years and came in the house to eat with us. And then behind that office building, there was a door here that went into the smokehouse. Now, the smokehouse had a fire pit that had big, wide, cut timbers around it. It was full of sand, and in the middle of that, there were ashes. And it had rafters, and from those rafters, Dad could hang hams and shoulders and bacon and smoke them. And on one side, it had a big vat box. It wasn't a vat, it was a box that had big, heavy wooden walls and a top and hinges. And he would raise that up and put the fresh hams and bury them in salt. And when they had been salted long enough, He took them out, ran a piece of fresh, new, clean baling wire through the hocks of them, brushed all the salt off of them, and hung them to smoke. And he kept this hickory fire, and he could lower the hams or raise the hams somehow or another with a chain he had. And he would get them close to the fire if he wanted them to get a lot of smoke, or if the fire was low, and as the fire was high, he would raise them up so they didn't burn. And when he had them to the exact right point, he had something he called sugar cure. And it was applied with something that looked like a hypodermic needle created for elephants. It had this huge, long, hollow needle and a stainless steel tube that you could push in, and he would take that and fill it up with something he called sugar cure, and he would take the hams and he would push that down into the bone of the ham. After he had done all the curing process, and I kind of think the sugar cure came right after the salt, but you have to remember I was a young child. Anyway, he would hang them there and smoke them. And when they were smoked and cured to his satisfaction, he would take brown paper that he got from Edward Sanford's Emporium, and he would wrap it around there, and he would tie it with a string at the bottom, and he would tie it with a string at the top, and he coated all of that with lard. And I asked him why, and he said it was to keep the skippers out. And skippers were some kind of a pest or a parasite that looked, and we got them once, we got them in a ham once, looked like maggots. And I always wondered if it was a polite word for maggots, but he called them skippers. So he cured his meat in this place. And then we had harness that was left over from the people that owned it. And he never did much with that room, but he called it the tack room. And that was where we hung the bridles and the saddles and everything later on when we got horses. And then this was a feed shed, and he kept barrels of chicken feed and all kinds of feed for the animals in this room. Had no windows, but it had a step you went up. And my memory of that is that he kept wooden tops on it. Well, he was very upset with himself because he didn't put one of the tops back on carefully. And he went in there one day and he found that a rat had climbed up his wooden barrel and gotten in his barrel of chicken feed, or whatever the feed was. So he went and got our black and white cat, whose name was Sarah, and he put her in there, and he left the top off of that barrel, and she went in that barrel to get that rat, and she came out with that rat, but she came out with her face terribly cut up and bleeding, and Dad felt bad about that, but he took the cat and he took her in the house, or took her to the house, and he doctored her, and she got well, but he got rid of the rat. And he never, ever, ever failed to put his lids carefully back on the feed after that.